So menopause is defined as the single day, 1 year after a woman has had her last period. So a whole year without having any further menstrual cycles. Perimenopause is typically around 5 years either side of that. So whereas the average age for menopause is 51, perimenopause typically affects women around 45 to 55. However, it can start much earlier, especially in individuals that have undergone surgical menopause. It can happen at any age, and it can also go on much further as well. And we know that there's a whole host of physical and psychological symptoms that can impact individuals during that period. And it's also really variable between different individuals as well. We know there's a lot of variation also according to race. So Black and Hispanic women may have different symptoms and be more impacted than white women, for example. And obviously it can impact any gender where there is ovaries or those hormonal fluctuations of estrogen, progesterone and testosterone as well. A lot of the trouble with this topic in general is because it's perceived as this physiological change. The great thing is cross-industry and in the media, there's a lot more discussion around menopause. And I think we've got a real opportunity as the veterinary profession, as female dominant, to actually lead the way in this and really empower our veterinary teams, individuals, and through organisational support to help people have a better experience of menopause through their working life and career. We know that actually 83% of people are impacted and it affects their working life and career. We know that some of the symptoms for over a third of women, the impacts on their mental health are moderate to severe. And to just really highlight that, the peak time for women to actually die by suicide is between the ages of roughly 45 and 55. And that's across different geographies as well. So there's studies in the US, in the UK and Europe showing this. That's also coincides with the perimenopause period. There's been no research, as far as I'm aware, to actually find a causal link between those two, but it's a startling correlation. And it's something that really, as an industry where we suffer from high incidence of mental health and suicide, we should really start to take seriously. We can have a huge impact together by supporting individuals. We've had individuals saying that they moved out of practice for things like sore joints and brain fog, to individuals saying it impacted their working life and relationships hugely across the board. So this is something that affects all of us, whether we are those individuals that are experiencing symptoms or whether we're working with colleagues or we have friends, family at home who may be impacted. Our clients as well are coming through the door. They may be experiencing some of the symptoms. It's not all hot flushes and brain fog. Some of the symptoms are things like crippling anxiety, chronic fatigue, sleeplessness. Even for those individuals that don't have some of the more overt symptoms that we commonly associate with menopause, and there can be over 70 recognised symptoms. And of course, in an industry where we face a retention problem, actually supporting those individuals in the workplace is hugely powerful. These are typically women at an age and stage of their careers where they have great levels of experience, great levels of knowledge to share. They can be mentors to younger members of the profession as well. We really need to be working harder to support these women through their experiences in practice so that they can stay in the profession longer and help to support the younger generation too. So off the back of the menopause report and finding these problems, we were desperate to come up with some solutions. And at Wellvet, we actually commissioned some expert providers to create some short form videos that people can dip in and out of. They're available at wellvet.co.uk under the resources section on the Menopause Hub. So we always think about hormone replacement therapy with menopause as the kind of #1 and the crux of treatment, but actually there are a whole host of lifestyle adjustments that we can make as individuals. Some people cannot have hormone replacement therapy for various risk factors, for example, but there's lifestyle medicine pillars, including what we eat, how we manage our stress, our sleep hygiene, our connections, avoiding toxins. And I don't just mean not smoking and not drinking, also other toxic habits that can actually drain us rather than energize us. Peer support. Peer support is one of the most important pillars of actually menopause support. It's recognized as being really powerful in actually helping us through that journey. So I really would encourage everyone, and even if you're not impacted directly, maybe support your loved one, maybe support your partner, maybe support your colleague by empowering yourself with that understanding. So you can say to people, there are some tools here to help you live better through this. You don't have to shut up and suffer in silence. So I think for our veterinary teams, the most important thing is to provide that culture of acceptance and understanding. I heard a great quote on a podcast which said there is a culture of acceptance of women's suffering. And I think this is really true, not just for the perimenopause period, but also for menstrual fluctuations. And if we can get the support right for these team members who are impacted through this period, we're also helping to support others with things like chronic illness, for example, which many of us will suffer with at some point in our lives. The other thing we can do for our teams are some really practical things. There are the 3 T's. So there's time, temperature, and toilets. So when people are having those periods of brain fog and knocked confidence, just literally having the ability to go and do a mindful practice for a few minutes is really important. So maybe it is about not cramming the days from start to finish, but actually facilitating people to stay longer in practice by slightly easing up and having a more sensitive workload. Then, toilets, access to toilet facilities, because urinary problems are a real thing. So, just having the consulting room closest to the toilets and facilitating those toilet breaks can be really helpful. And then temperature, so sympathetic clothing, not scrubs where you're easily going to show if you've had a hot flush recently. Also for our support teams as well. So for the receptionists in the practices and the vet techs, just making sure that, we have clothing that is appropriate. And the temperature control of the room as well, having air conditioning or access to ventilation can really help, or even just a fan in the corner. And this is a time when flexible working options can be really important as well. We know that flexible work is one of those things that actually a lot of team members are looking for increasingly across the profession. We know that flexible working is something that's increasingly being talked about across the whole sector, the whole veterinary sector. And it's certainly something that, this is one of the things that the British Medical Association pulled out, is the importance of allowing those flexible working patterns so that people that do have health challenges can stay in the workplace and continue to contribute, and which they really would like to do. And having a real genuine feeling in the practice that the leadership are approachable, the team managers are approachable, in order to be able to come and say, could I have some adjustments? Could we have a discussion about what that looks like? And something as practical as putting in place a menopause policy, which maybe lays out the steps that people can go down and lays out the fact that there are awareness and support resources and some of the adjustments that the practice can make, and having that discussion on an individual basis. As I say, the symptoms do vary within and between individuals over time. So it may be an ongoing discussion, and making sure that people feel empowered to have that can really help them stay in the profession and within your team. And at a time when we know retention is an issue, we know that women are still leaving the profession at a greater rate than men. We know that women are having increasing risk of suicide compared to men in the profession. It's so important that each of us does everything we can to support people in the profession across the board. I think we have a real opportunity, particularly for the larger organisations and employers, to really change the culture of veterinary medicine. I've certainly been in practices where the hero culture was celebrated. If you didn't eat and you didn't sleep and you soldiered through and you got through all the lambings and calvings and C-sections and emergencies, clinics, then you were the hero. But actually, we know that causes people to burn out. We know that impacts mental and physical health. So actually having a cultural shift where we really show that empathy and support for individuals. We talk about sustained longevity in the profession. We talk about supporting people physically and psychologically. It's going to be hugely powerful to ensure that the next generation of veterinary professionals are happier and healthier for longer in the profession. And finally, I think we need to build on sector-specific advice for the veterinary industry. A lot of the tools that we already have are actually adapted from other sectors and don't necessarily fit the somewhat unique aspects of veterinary practice and veterinary life. So finally, I just want to say this is not a woman's problem. This is a human problem. It affects everybody because we all have colleagues, partners, mothers, daughters, wives, clients who are impacted by this. In my generation, my parents didn't talk about this. And I think a lot of us in leadership positions maybe aren't used to talking about this. The older generations, those more experienced in the profession, this just wasn't a thing that ever came up. That doesn't make it right not to talk about it. Now we have more agency, we have more understanding, we can provide that support. And it's so important for the men, for the leaders, as well as the women themselves, for all genders, for all ages and stages, to understand that this is a human problem that can affect all of us, whether it's through our relationships or through our own physical and psychological health. So please, whoever you are, if you're watching this is something that we all need to understand and do more to support those who are impacted. Because at the end of the day, we're all going to be impacted in some way, because we'll all know someone for whom this will be a really important age and stage for them.